Imagine, picture this. It's the Roaring Twenties. Yeah, jazz is in the air, and fortunes are being made left and right. But in Oklahoma, a much different story is unfolding.
Yeah.
It's a story of immense wealth, betrayal, and a string of mysterious deaths within a single Native American nation. Today, we're diving deep into the chilling story of the Osage murders.
What I think is so captivating about this case is how it really shines a light on a really, really dark period in American history. It exposes the lengths that people will go to for wealth and power.
Yeah.
And it's a story that, despite taking place a century ago, it still resonates with us with issues that we grapple with today.
Absolutely. And we've got some fascinating sources to guide us. We'll be pulling from David Grann's gripping book, Killers of the Flower Moon, which, meticulously reconstructs the events, and also using, alongside that, historical accounts and legal documents. So the Osage Nation, they were forced from their lands in Kansas. They had settled in Oklahoma in the 1870s. But what's remarkable is they were one of the few tribes to actually purchase their reservation.
Right.
And in doing so, they shrewdly retained the mineral rights.
Yeah, and that seemingly like minor detail proved to be life-altering. They were unknowingly sitting on a sea of oil, a black gold rush that would transform them into some of the wealthiest people per capita in the world by the 1920s.
Yeah, it's almost like a real life rags to riches story, but with a sinister twist.
Yeah.
Because this sudden wealth attracted the worst kind of attention. It began with whispers, then a rising tide of fears, a series of unexplained deaths swept through the Osage community.
And it wasn't just isolated incidents. A very chilling pattern emerged, suggesting a calculated conspiracy. Anna Brown was an Osage woman, and she is found dead with a bullet to the back of her head. And her death would be the first in a long, long line of tragedies. Over the next few years, at least 60 Osage people would meet similar suspicious ends.
Yeah, this wasn't, just individual acts of violence. This was a systematic targeting of the Osage people, driven by a greed so powerful it led to a reign of terror. And at the heart of this conspiracy was a figure who seems straight out of a classic Western film, William Hale, a wealthy and influential cattle baron.
Hale, as depicted in Grann's book, was a master manipulator. I mean, he was weaving this web of murder and deceit to seize control of the Osage's oil wealth.
Yeah.
He used his power and connections to build a network of accomplices, including corrupt lawmen, greedy businessmen, and even those who were entrusted with caring for the sick and dying.
Wow. It's truly horrifying to think about how deeply this conspiracy ran. Let's take a closer look at one specific family that was tragically caught in Hale's web, the Burkhart family. Molly Burkhart was an Osage woman. She was married to Ernest Burkhart, who was Hale's own nephew. And this raises a question that's central to the case. Was Ernest a willing participant in his uncle's schemes, or was he more of a pawn, a manipulated pawn in a deadly game?
Yeah, it's a complex question. The sources paint a picture of genuine affection between Ernest and Molly initially. However, Hale's influence over Ernest was undeniable. Whether Ernest was a willing accomplice or a manipulated puppet, the consequences for Molly's family were devastating.
Totally, yeah. We're talking about string of murders within her own family. Her sister Anna was the first victim, then her mother, and then another sister, all falling prey to this horrific plot. And it's a stark reminder of the human cost of greed and ambition.
And it's crucial to remember that the violence targeting Molly's family was just one thread in a much larger tapestry of exploitation directed at the Osage people. I mean,
Yeah.
doctors, morticians, businessmen, even those in law enforcement, many turned a blind eye, or worse, actively participated in the systematic theft of Osage wealth.
Faced with such widespread corruption and unable to find justice locally, the Osage Nation took a bold step. In 1923, with the death toll continuing to rise, they reached out to a relatively new federal agency, the Bureau of Investigation, which we know today as the FBI.
Yeah, this case would become a defining moment for the young Bureau. It marked one of its first major homicide investigations. J. Edgar Hoover, the ambitious young director, saw this as a chance to prove the Bureau's capability. So he assigned Tom White, a seasoned Texas Ranger, to assemble an undercover team and get to the bottom of these killings.
And this investigation wasn't a walk in the park, right? I mean, they were entering a territory that was rife with corruption, where witnesses were afraid to talk and evidence was easily buried.
Exactly. It was a painstaking process that required undercover agents to infiltrate Hale's network, gather evidence and win over the trust of a community that had been betrayed time and again. But But their efforts would ultimately lead them to unravel the conspiracy and expose the dark truth behind the Osage murders.
So the FBI, against all odds, they managed to build a case against William Hale and some of his accomplices.
Yeah.
But was justice truly served?
Well, that's where things get even more complicated. While Hale and a few of his key players were convicted, many others involved in this elaborate scheme managed to evade prosecution. The legal system, even with the FBI's intervention, couldn't fully dismantle the web of corruption that had taken root in Osage County.
Yeah, it's a reminder that sometimes, even when the perpetrators are identified, true justice remains elusive. And what about the Osage people themselves? Did they ever reclaim the wealth that was so ruthlessly stolen from them?
Sadly, no. The financial losses the Osage Nation suffered during this period were they were staggering. And while some restitution was attempted, it was a mere fraction of what had been taken. The impact of those losses is felt even today. A lasting reminder of the injustice inflicted upon them.
It's heartbreaking to consider the generational trauma caused by these events, but amidst the tragedy, there's also a story of resilience. Despite the horrors they endured, the Osage people refused to be broken. They fought for their rights, they rebuilt their lives, and they continued to honor their heritage.
Absolutely. It's essential to acknowledge the strength and the determination of the Osage people. They established their own constitution and government. They fought for fairer treatment under the law, and they worked tirelessly to preserve their culture and language. Their story is a testament to the human spirit's ability to overcome even the most devastating adversity.
It makes you wonder, how did they manage to rebuild and find hope after such a dark chapter?
Well, their resilience was rooted in their strong community bonds, their deep connection to their ancestral land, and their unwavering commitment to their cultural identity. They refused to be defined by the tragedy inflicted upon them. They chose to define themselves by their strength, their resilience, and their determination to move forward.
It's an inspiring message, especially considering how the crimes against the Osage Nation were largely ignored or forgotten for decades.
That's right. The Osage murders serve as a stark reminder of how history can be silenced, how the stories of marginalized communities can be erased. It's through the work of historians, journalists, and activists like David Grann that these stories are brought to light, ensuring that the victims are remembered and their voices are heard.
And with increased awareness comes a chance to learn from these past injustices. The Osage murders expose the dangers of, unchecked greed and the devastating consequences of prejudice and exploitation. They challenge us to confront these issues head on and to work towards a more just and equitable society.
It's a challenge we can't afford to ignore. The Osage murders should serve as a wake-up call, urging us to be vigilant in protecting the rights of all people, especially those who are most vulnerable to exploitation and abuse.
This case also underscores the importance of a free press and investigative journalism. Without the tireless efforts of individuals who dared to dig deeper and uncover the truth, these crimes might have remained buried, the perpetrators unpunished, and the victims forgotten.
That's a powerful point. Journalists play a crucial role in holding power accountable and ensuring that justice, even if delayed, is ultimately served. They give a voice to the voiceless and shine a light on the dark corners where injustice thrives.
The Osage murders force us to confront uncomfortable truths about our history and the systems that perpetuate inequality. It's a story that compels us to ask difficult questions about our own roles in upholding these systems and what we can do to dismantle them.
Those questions are essential. We can't simply acknowledge the horrors of the past and move on. We have a responsibility to learn from those mistakes, to challenge the status quo, and to actively work towards creating a world where such atrocities are never repeated.
And this brings us back to the importance of remembering, of ensuring that these stories are not forgotten. Because as the saying goes, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it.
Yeah, it's a sentiment that holds particular weight when we consider how the patterns of exploitation that targeted the Osage Nation a century ago are in many ways still present today. Land grabs, environmental racism, the marginalization of indigenous communities, these issues continue to plague us.
That's a sobering thought. The Osage murders might seem like a distant historical event, but they hold up a mirror to our present, challenging us to confront the uncomfortable reality that these forms of injustice are not relics of the past.
Exactly. We see echoes of those same predatory tactics in the exploitation of vulnerable communities around the world, whether it's through, unfair labor practices, environmental destruction, or the denial of basic human rights.
The fight for justice, for equality, for the recognition of the inherent dignity of all people. It's a fight that continues today. And the story of the Osage people, their courage, their resilience, their unwavering determination offers a powerful source of inspiration for those who continue to fight for a better world.
Yeah, it's a sobering reminder that the pursuit of wealth and power, often at the expense of others, is it's a recurring theme throughout history, and the Osage murders are a particularly stark example of how these forces can converge to such devastating effect. Yeah, what really strikes me is how easily systems of power can be manipulated to serve the interests of, well, the wealthy and the powerful, often at the expense of those who are most vulnerable. And we see this in the way that local law enforcement was corrupted, how business interests were prioritized over human life, and how the legal system for a time just failed to deliver justice.
Yeah, it's almost as if an entire society just turned a blind eye to what was happening, or even worse, actively participated in the exploitation of the Osage people.
Yeah.
It raises some uncomfortable questions about our own complicity in similar systems, even today.
Absolutely. We can't afford to be passive observers. We all have a responsibility to be aware of the systems that perpetuate inequality and to challenge them. The Osage murders should serve as a wake-up call, reminding us that silence is often a form of complicity.
So what can we take away from this deep dive into the Osage murders? For me, it's a stark reminder that the pursuit of wealth and power can corrupt even the most seemingly upstanding individuals, and it really underscores the devastating impact of prejudice and discrimination on vulnerable communities.
And let's not forget the resilience of the Osage people, despite, I mean, just unimaginable suffering. They refused to be silenced. They fought for justice. They rebuilt their lives, and they continue to honor their heritage. Their story it's a testament to the strength of the human spirit.
And this case also demonstrates the crucial role of investigative journalism in exposing wrongdoing and holding those in power, accountable. David Grann's meticulous research brought this story to light, and it's prompting a reexamination of a dark period in American history.
And finally, it challenges us to be critical consumers of information, to question narratives that perpetuate stereotypes or downplay injustice. The Osage murders remind us that history is often written by the victors, and that we must be willing to dig deeper, to seek out the voices of those who have been marginalized or silenced.
Well, this has been a truly eye-opening deep dive. The Osage murders are a chilling reminder of the depths of human depravity, but also a testament to the power of resilience and the fight for justice. We encourage you to continue exploring this compelling and important chapter of American history. There's so much more to learn, and it's a story that deserves to be told and remembered.